is the second part of the Linefeed reading list for September 2010. Now, I had so many magazines this September because it's like all the biannuals, fashion biannuals, all that sort of stuff comes out, that I've split this month's reading list in two. So I covered loads of the fashion stuff in the first one, and now I'm going to do everything else. And you can see there's still loads to get through. Starting with the always impressive Graphic, which is a Korean graphic design magazine, which I've featured a few times, and every time I just want to feature it because they don't ever seem to do a dud issue. But there's a lot of time and energy and thought that goes into this magazine, so you'd sort of hope not. This issue is about printing, which is quite integral to graphic design, or at least it used to be. You could sort of say that that a lot of graphic designers are having to struggle with the divide between print and digital. So again, timely as well. I'm just pointing that these are all ads supply for printers, various printers around the place, and they're really cute ads, really nicely done. This was really good. I was a printing house in hell and saw the method in which knowledge is transmitted, something else. It is really nice. I mean, this is an ad, but it actually tells you how to prepare artwork for risograph printing. So I don't know if that means that the magazine's design the ads for these places. They're all quite different and quirky, so it's really really nice. I really like the idea of customized advertising at the moment. I think it's a really interesting thing to do. Also interesting is this idea that I really liked this too. Like, the magazine's full color, has lots of really lush images, and rather than clustering up the spreads with loads of text about the images or making you go further into the magazine to find out, they've put this little booklet in, which is printed on I think it's sort of like Bible paper. It's really thin sort of stuff, so you barely notice it slotting in the magazine. It doesn't take up very much sort of depth at all, and you can sort of like open up a page to an image, and then you've got this sort of little guidebook which then tells you more about the images. That was one of our What's Up guys featured on the blog that I first saw in Amsterdam, that I was pointing to back there. So yeah, I wanted to show people this because I thought it was really cool. You can just sort of flick through, and then you get out your little book that comes with it, and you find out a bit more about it, and yeah, it's really cool. And it frees up the magazine so they can just focus on images. And it's really interesting, like for each printer they've sort of chosen to display the work they've done in different ways, and I think they've tried to choose printers that all use very differing techniques. Like there's risograph in there, and there's offset and all that sort of stuff. So they've really, it's a really thorough magazine in terms of the research they do. This was just weird. It was like a guy who had painted things using CMYK and then tried to reproduce. I'm not going to explain it very well. It's just, if you see it, look at it and go, wow, that's odd. Or just look at it and say that's rubbish. One of those. What else can I say about it? There is, you have your little booklet, but then you also have like more information in the magazine as well. So it's not like you're lacking in content. I thought that was cool too. Like, a lot of their issues seem to be selling out, so it's nice to see the mag seems to be doing well. I mean, I don't know what their print money is, but that was kind of cool. This is another design-orientated one. I'm going to call it a newspaper. It's not a newspaper though, is it? It's just printed on newsprint. It's pretty much a really clean format in that it's a bunch of creatives, an interview, and some of their work. It's almost like a series of portfolios, actually, which is again a nice idea, just to present a regular grouping of people's work. And there's some really interesting people, and there's a couple that I probably would have not included if I was going to be really picky, just because I think we've seen so much about, like, it's people like Alex Trouchet and who else was in there? Michael C. Place, and they're putting them in a magazine is almost a bit of a design cliche. You know, it's like you see so much about them online, and I think anyone that buys this magazine because they're interested in graphic design knows these people's work really, really well. And it would have been nice to see a few more obscure designers maybe that we didn't know so much about featured instead. It felt a little like designer boys club at some points, but still really nice format. Oh, and I've moved on really swiftly anyway. Yeah. This I've been very, very lucky, and I've got a Stack subscription now. And if you haven't seen Stack before, it's a subscription service where you get a surprise magazine. So you don't subscribe to a magazine, you subscribe to a curated selection of various magazines. And yeah, the surprise is you get you don't know what's going to fall through your mail slot. And for this, I think it's monthly. I have to check that actually. The Drawbridge was the key publication for this issue. And the Drawbridge is really interesting because it's produced by a sort of private club in London. And from what I can tell, the editor sort of managed to shore up a bit of finance from this club to produce what's essentially a sort of newspaper format publication full of essays and really lovely illustrations. So kind of hard to get hold of because they don't necessarily have to sell copies. But if you're a Stack subscriber, no problem whatsoever. Looking forward to the next round as well. I'm talking all the way through Little White Lies, who have just sort of had not a relaunch, but they've gone and looked at the magazine and changed the paper stock and changed the typeface in the masthead and just sort of given the whole thing a bit of a shake. Not that it needed it, and in fact it just looks even better, and it's sort of got thicker paper, so it feels sort of weightier and more tome-like, I guess. Same format, like they talk about a film at the start and then they have a series of articles. In this case, the articles were all focusing on, I think it was film rebels. So they spoke to Alex Cox, who's like one of my favorite directors ever in the world. Thank you for Repro Man, that's such a good film. And they talked about Twin Peaks being sort of quite a rebellious TV program. And then they have the back section, which I guess if I have a criticism, it's just that it used to be like this section was 2-color and the rest of the magazine was like full color, and there was a distinct difference. But now the whole magazine's sort of the same color and the same paper all throughout, so there's not so much definition between the really interesting back section bit and the rest of the magazine. But that's a minor gripe, you know, like. It's still really lush, and you can see like the quality of illustration just keeps getting better and better. Like they keep finding more and more interesting illustrators, which is saying something since the magazine's focused on illustration so much since the beginning. I also received a whole bunch of New York magazines this month, which was a real treat because I've admired it for a while, but never sort of be able to justify going and buying it because never been to New York or anything. But design wise, it's just such a really well done. It's very typically American in that it's there's a lot of attention to structure and there's a lot of science in the way they lay out pages. Although at the same time, I just realised this one is just full of text, which I thought was quite unusual. Like that shows that that's giving readers, you know, saying that we know you're intelligent and that you don't need crazy graphics all over the place. Here's a page full of text because we know you're happy just to read, which is only something a really confident magazine can do and get away with. And you know, it's because New York is quite established that they can do that as well. Like, it's almost expected that they need to be a bit authoritative, and a page full of text really says that. It's almost like saying less to tell people more or something. That's a bit crap, isn't it? But this was a special edition anyway, and this typeface I've seen actually cropping up loads. I thought it might have been specially commissioned. It might have been specially commissioned for New York. I'm not sure, but since then it sort of seems to be popping up on sort of design book covers and stuff like that. And it's you know, it makes sense. It's really strong, and it really brands the whole magazine. I think that's the one of the big differences between American magazines and, you know, magazines from elsewhere in the world, is they're really good at branding a whole magazine. Like, it's not, you're not just doing page layouts. They're very conscious of branding a product, which, you know, I always bang on about marketing and all that sort of stuff, but I think that design-wise, that's when it gets really interesting, when you can sort of, it expands the magazine without, you know, having to do additional marketing gumph, actually. So yeah, it's a bit anti-marketing then. Yeah, that's what I've worked out. That's why I like it. It's anti-marketing. You don't need marketing if you're branding your magazine strongly enough. I think that's a good point. Quite pleased with that. Yeah, New York. I'm sure I'll post more of New York at some point, a bit more in depth. What have we got next? Oh, Dwell. Oh, poor Dwell. I just really think Dwell was of the last decade, and that they just haven't really caught up. You know, it's almost like it's being sort of preserved in aspect, and they're just sort of letting the magazine flop about now. Editorially, I mean, design-wise, it's still just as strong, as there seems to be less opportunity to do interesting design within the magazine because of the editorial. I think it seems to be trying to find a middle ground, and it's like, why, when you can just be really good. This is a special edition that they've started doing quite a lot of. The last one was about, you know, your perfect house, and it was all right, but this one's much better because it's about product, and which means it's really accessible, and you can actually just flick through it like a catalogue. In fact, it sort of reads like a really posh sort of IKEA Habitat catalogue type thing, and I love those sort of catalogues, so I thought it was really good. And you know, it's almost like taking the really nice design work that's gone into Dwell and seeing what would happen if you turned it into a catalogue. Yeah, so you get sort of a lead in with lots of lifestyle, what they call lifestyle shots, and then you get the product shots. And there were all these really nice shaped graphics sort of sprinkled throughout, and really nice sort of treatment with sort of horizontal lines coming on the pages and stuff. Oh, I forgot about this, the crazy wallpaper moving trick thing. Wallpaper will go down in history, like their current art director, he's making a name for himself for doing crazy sort of optical illusions and stuff like that. And this issue has a really, if you haven't seen it, I'm sure most people would have seen this actually, but if you haven't, I'll show it to you in a sec. I really like that little brochure too that was designed by Andy Romenta in there. That was also inserted into Apartmento magazine a little while ago. Yes, this is the crazy effect. You get this sheet with black and white lines on it, and you move it across images and they animate. That was really good actually, the little logo spinning around. It's all really clever and really inventive, and you sort of think, how did they fit the time to do this in with making the rest of the magazine? It's got some weird sort of guest editorial stuff by David Lynch as well, including this fold-out thing, which actually left me a bit cold. I'm a big fan of David Lynch, but I don't really need to see like weird symbols on sort of crafty paper with Helvetica just sort of slapped on top. I didn't think that really helped. I was more excited about the moving page. Well, you would be, sort of with the animated page thing. It's a really good trick. If I had to analyse it though, it felt a bit clunky because the lines were so thick. You sort of had a bit of trouble seeing what was being animated when you pulled it across. It was like looking through these sort of, looking through some bars to try and see what's going on behind it. But at the same time, it's not like they're going to do that every issue. It's a really, one-off experiment, and like really should be encouraged. That's just cool. Like, it actually looks better when I filmed it than when you sort of sitting. Well, I was lying in bed reading this, and I had a lot of trouble getting the thing to lie flat and all that sort of business. I wonder, like, I really hope that this helps with their sales, like that people are picking up because of these crazy sort of. I see they're getting into the iPad as well there. What else have they done in the past? Oh, they were one of the first to do that sort of the thing where you point your camera at a thing and a 3D What's-It comes off the page. I mean, all these things that they sort of, once you'd done them, they sort of felt a bit lame, but at the same time it was quite exciting because they're not going to do them every issue. I see this has got QR codes in it as well, so they are sort of carrying across some of the stuff they've done before. There's a lot of weird interaction. I think this is what is making Wallpaper quite interesting at the moment, is that they are working on making the printed page more interactive in as many different ways as possible, and that's something that really needs to be encouraged. That's quite, that's really exciting. But at the same time, they're not sacrificing the magazine for that. I think Pop tried to do that recently. I tried working with their weird little widget thing they were doing, and it just didn't work, and you sort of thought, it was a bit tokenary, whereas with Wallpaper they're really interweaving everything in with the actual printed magazine. This is a food magazine. There's been so many food magazines around, just coming out all over the place. Like after Fire and Knives, and in Australia we had Condiment, which I haven't seen a copy of actually. I'd quite like to see a copy of that. It looks quite good. And I saw another one called Eat Me, and now we have this one called Rotten Apples. This magazine's just fell on the floor. It's Bristol based, am I right? I think all the ads look like they're from Bristol. There's an article about Brighton randomly inserted in there. And it's nice. I sort of struggled with the design a bit because I felt it didn't really hang together. I mean, it's I don't know what it was. I mean, maybe it's just the type of fonts. I don't know. It just felt like every page was different, and I was getting confused between ads and editorial, and I don't think there was enough in the design or something. And it was sort of, their angle was that it's sort of food and art, whereas everything else is sort of food for foodies, whereas this was about quirky types of artistic food sort of things, which is an interesting angle. I think it's one to watch, but it's not quite there yet. I got sent this interesting thing, and I needed to look into it a bit more. Self-published Be Happy, from what I can tell, they're really into like self-publishing, possibly using print on demand, and mainly involving photography. So this is what confused me, because I'm really interested in self-publishing and print on demand and all that sort of business. But I didn't get that they were coming from a photography angle mainly. And a lot of the sort of things they feature are by photographers, like books that photographers have made. This is like a compendium of these sort of mainly photographic self-published books, presented as a self-published photographic book. which is really cool. Like, when you think about it that way, it's really. And then at the back, they list. It was really quite comprehensive. They listed all the specs for each of the books featured. So even though you can't really see the books, the photographs of the books aren't literal, but the copy at the back is. So that really helps. I'll include the web address to that on the blog, because it's a really interesting project. And also, this came in it, and this is a new print-on-demand setup that's just launched called ubyu, which I'll be featuring on the blog as well. And I think that's me done for September. October's already piling up in the corner. I'm going to have to do that soon as well. But I hope that was entertaining. And thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you later. Bye!